Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Adobe Live. I'm your host, Amy Hood of Hoodzpah. We are based in Southern California. We are a type design and brand identity studio, and it is Type Bootcamp. And so we are doing all things type this week. We'll be here every day, same place, same time. But today we are working on taking some lettering from sketch to vector. So I've got my sketches ready. I put them up on Instagram and Twitter on our social at Hoodzpah Design, and I had people vote. And so far, resoundingly, this bottom sketch is the one that everyone wants to do. So without further ado, we only have 25 minutes, so I'm going to jump right in. We're going to go super quick. And I just wanted to first just put over here the pen tool shortcuts that I'm going to be using, because every time I try to use them, it's like driving. When you try to teach someone how to drive, it becomes second nature and you just forget how to even explain it. So take a screenshot of this if you want to remember the shortcuts and you want to try them later, and definitely follow along. And if you decide you want to create your own lettering and share later, definitely do that and tag us at hashtag Adobe Live after you're done, and we'd love to see what you make. So I pulled in my sketches. I always like to do a sketch first before I do lettering. It just makes it so much easier to know the roadmap, right? We can take detours if we want, but to have some sort of guide on where we're going, this is, the end goal, it kind of helps just move things along. And then I like to use grid paper. It's so much easier than trying to draw your own lines, trying to draw a straight line. So I use grid paper, and these are some of the sketches that I kind of made this morning. And I think we're going to do this bottom one, like I said. So step one, I dragged my JPEGs in. I clipping masked by going Command-7 to just get the one that I want to work with. And then over here in my layers panel, I like to keep it super organized, because the worst is locking a piece and then having to unlock it because you need to get to it. So I like to just put all of my image references and all of my guides on one layer. So that's this bottom layer here called guides, etc. And then I have a layer called art, and that's where I do all my pen tooling. So let's lock that layer. And I'm actually going to make my artwork just a little bit bigger. I want to work really big so that it's very forgiving. And then I'm just going to jump onto my art layer, and we are going to get started. So the shortcut to get your pen tool is P. And I love using shortcuts. They're so much handier and it's so much quicker. So the first thing you want to think about is your extrema. I think it's called extrema. Either way, it's your extreme points. So if you think about like a northwest, southeast kind of, directional, if you think about it in those terms, the northernmost point, the southernmost point, and the eastern, westernmost points of your artwork, of your lettering. So if I think about that here, I want to click on, this top of this serif, or the top of this S stroke. And then I want to go to the leftmost point, and I'm just going to click and hold shift and drag. And that's going to get my handles are going to come out from my anchor point. Now the handles just tell your anchor point which direction you want the path to go. So I'm saying I want it to go down. Now I'm going to do another anchor point down here. I'm going to pull those handles out again, and I'm letting the path know I want it to go now to the right. So we're just going to keep doing that, kind of thinking about it in terms of the extrema, the northern, southern, western, and easternmost points. And I'm just going to keep going from there. Now, if you go Shift C, that will give you your pen tool selector. And you can just click on this handle and that'll get rid of it. And then I pressed P again and I can pick up my path again and just continue on. And I'm going to hold Shift to pull that handle of that anchor point out a little bit higher. And I'm going to keep going along. And when you think about where you're placing your points, I like to try and think about it. You want it to be fairly even. So for example, like I'm going to just finish up this path and then I'm going to kind of tell you what I mean by that. So right now, this anchor point and its handles and this one down here, this handle goes way further up than this top handle. So I kind of want those to be a little bit more even. And you never want your handles to cross like this. If this is crossing the directional of this, that's gone too far. That's going to make it kind of wonky. So you always want to kind of, you might need to add another anchor point, that sort of thing, to kind of get it a little bit more finessed. But those are kind of some of the rules and the guides to kind of keep things nice and neat and nice and even and nice and easy to adjust. So if I click my A shortcut now, that'll give me my direct select. And now I can go in and kind of manually adjust now that I've gotten kind of the rough idea in. I like to work pretty quick. I'm going to go ahead and put an outline on this so it's easier for you all to see. That red is kind of hard to see. So I'm going to put a bigger stroke on that, maybe like 4. And I can already see some wonky stuff, but just for the sake of time, let's move kind of quick. That's how I like to work, really quick. And then I like to adjust it later. So I have kind of an italics going on this one. So I think what I'm going to do is draw myself some italic guidelines so that my angle is kind of consistent throughout. So I do this all the time. I'm going to draw an angle based on my H. And I'm going to turn it a really annoying color so that I can see it really easily. I'm going to turn it hot pink. And I'm going to pull up my layers and I'm going to pull that down onto my guides. I'll unlock it and lock that back. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to just option drag this, and maybe I'll do it the width of this H stem. And if you click Command D after that, you can just create a bunch of guides. It'll just repeat the action that you just did. So it's super handy. So that might be a little bit too much. We might not be able to see very good. So I'm just gonna pull that back to like 2 points instead of 4. And we can still see it fairly okay. And actually, maybe I'll turn this to blue because it is quite annoying, quite an eyesore. So we'll lock that layer again and we'll go back to our drawing. And maybe what I'll do is just take this sketch and turn it to 50% transparency, just so it's not so dark. It's because it's a little hard to see what I'm doing. Okay, that's way better. We'll lock that. So back to my pen tool on my art layer. And now I can just kind of go in, and if I hit Command R, I'll get my rulers, and I can pull down some rulers for my ascenders where I want that to go. Your ascender is the part of the lowercase letter that extends up above the X height. And I'll get my baseline. That's where all of your letters meet at the bottom. And I'll also do some descender guides, and that's where it descends below the baseline. I have a hard time remembering all of these like terms. I always call them the wrong thing. And if you also have that trouble, there's tons of really quick guides on the internet that you can just drag off and save. But the thing that goes down below the baseline, you can just call it that if you need to. So now I'm just using my pen tool. I'm going to keep filling in here. Going to make sure that everything is in this black outline so I can kind of get an idea of what I'm doing. That looks good. And the trick for me for fast lettering is option dragging and reusing pieces as often as I can. So for example, the stem of this H, I want the I stem and the N stem to be the same width. So why don't we just copy that? Why don't we just option drag that? Use our direct selection tool, the A for the shortcut, and just drag that down so it's to our guides that we drew. Let me turn on the guides again. I'm going to draw a guide for our X height. And now I have a perfect I. And I can option drag that again for my N. And we are cooking with gas. It's so much quicker when you just copy things as much as you can, save yourself the time, and just optimize your process. I sound like a rise and grind bro. Whereas Joshua says, he in here, the rise and grind king. And so then I just keep going with my anchor points. I'm just trying to get them spaced out at the extrema. Anytime I'm changing directions, I create a new anchor point. And I can follow these little guides that I made for myself so that my cuts all follow that angular, the same angular cut. And it's going to look really nice and consistent that way. And now I know that my widths are one of those blue kind of sections is my width. So I'm going to just, Rob Magnell said the last point was a doozy. It crashed the whole thing. No, it didn't. Sorry about that, you all. We had some technical difficulties. The stream crashed for a second, but we're back. Thank you for hanging tight. Said James said, bagel break. I wish. I'm eating an Entenmann's snack, like gas station food. So I wish I was eating a bagel. But okay, back to our project. So I've got my anchor points here. You can see how this curve is looking really awkward. It's just a little bit, it's just kind of janky. So what I'm going to do is just kind of, if you do your direct select, you can start kind of adjusting the handles to where you're getting a smoother, maybe I lengthen this to kind of get a smoother round on that. And that's starting to look a lot better. Maybe I move this anchor point over a little bit, shorten this handle. It's all about finessing those with those handles. direct select tool afterwards is like the key to lettering in my mind. You'll never get a perfect vector on the first try unless you're Ade Hogue, who is like just an absolute master. I took his and Bob Ewing's course because we were all teaching at the same conference one year, and those guys are just masters. Such nice dudes. So we're going to continue on here. Also, another cheat: use your shapes as often as you can. I'm about to do this eye tittle, which is the dot of the eye. Fun fact. So I'm just going to draw a circle, and then I'm going to use my shear tool, not skew, shear, and I'm just going to shear it kind of in keeping with the angle that we've got going on. And your tittle of your eye is always going to be a little bit bigger than the stem. It's going to extend a little bit more. Same with your rounds of your letters. So the bowl of the letter is that rounded part of like an A or an H or an N. And those are going to extend a little bit above your X height, which is my ruler guide right here. And it's just because it optically will look the same. It makes it look as thick as the straights, the horizontals, or the verticals. So you're just optically, first you do it perfectly, right? Everything's perfect. You can option drag, you can make everything exactly the same width, but then you need to optically adjust to make sure it just looks even to the naked eye. So it doesn't always have to be perfect. It can start perfect, but then you can adjust from there. So I option dragged over my N from my H. We're working smarter, not harder here. And I'm going to just cut that. So what I'm going to do is use a rectangle, and I'm just going to draw a box where I want to cut everything. And I'm going to shift select that with my N, and I'm going to go to the Pathfinder tool and use subtract. And that's an easy way to do that. And then the E, oof, this is going to be a doozy. Let's start with a circle. Let's make it easy on ourselves, because why make it harder? We're going to have a little bit of overshoot on the top above the X height and on the bottom below the baseline, right? We want to make sure that optically looks thick enough. And then let's make that a little wider. I feel like it's not wide enough. And let's shear it again, just like we did the tittle of the eye. So if I'm following my sketch, it's about there. I think that looks right. We can always adjust later. And then I'm going to, what I like to do is, because the E is so hard, I always use shapes first to kind of test my theory. And then I Pathfinder once I'm happy with it. So I think what I'll do is, for that crossbar, I'm just going to, again, use a rectangle to draw a shape instead of trying to make it perfect myself. And if you hold shift while you're rotating, it'll rotate in perfect 45-degree angles. So I want it a little bit more than that, so I'm not going to do that in the end. And I'm just going to keep rotating that. That looks good. And then I'm going to copy my circle that I've got for the outer section of the O. I'm going to paste in front, Command F, and I'm going to just option scale in and hold shift down. And then I'm going to kind of try to get these widths a little bit better. So now that I've got something to start from, I can, again, direct select and adjust from there. So maybe like that. And just kind of keep finessing. And this will probably be the jankiest one that we do, and we'll have to probably come back to this. But for now, I think that's looking pretty good. So I will then, I think I'll go ahead and just cut this here. If you go to C, if you click C, that'll grab your scissors tool, and then you can cut little points that you need. Cut there. And then I'll cut right here, I think. So now I can delete those paths and continue drawing. So let's just pull this all the way up to here. This needs to be super straight, so that anchor handle is going to go really long and really down. And then this one as well, like that. I'm going to extend this handle out a little bit. It's a little bit too sharp. And then we can kind of adjust this a little bit later. So we'll go like that. Now, sometimes what I like to do when I get to this point, it's like, okay, I've got a few letters. I want to know how things are going. I don't want to get too far and then realize that this is terrible and I should have done something else. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll option drag and fill it to kind of get a better sense instead of seeing it just outlined. And we can fix that later as well. It looks like these aren't lining up just perfectly, but we'll get to that. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and just option drag this. All of this. I can see that S definitely needs some help. And I'm just going to reverse the fill to kind of see. Oof, it's definitely rough, but we're going to keep going because it's looking generally good. I can see what we need to do. So we need to kind of add some more weight there, a couple of other things, but I think in general, it's looking pretty good. So let's go and get our ON continued, and then we can keep finessing. So for the O, I'm going to do the same thing I did last time, draw a circle. And let's get a ruler guide down to where my S is because I want it to match there. And I think the bottom, yep, the bottom is right there. So I'm going to go here and we're going to shear that just like we did the last one. If I eyedropper to the outline that I've got on the other things, that's helpful. Copy paste in front. And you know what I'm going to do this time? I'm going to select that shape and I'm going to go Object, Path, Offset Path. And I'm going to go minus 50, and that'll make a little circle inside. And then I can kind of adjust. I think I'm just going to delete these over here. I like to just have 4 anchor points on my O. It just seems a little bit easier to me. And just kind of play with this till it's starting to look nice. And that's all it is continually finessing. It looks weird at first, but that's why I like to just keep going. I like to not worry too much about, oh, this isn't looking right, because it never does at first. So just keep going and you can kind of tweak it as you go at the end. All right. So let's just get that there. And then luckily the N, we already have an N. We'll just option drag that. Smarter, not harder. Same with the dot, the period at the end. And actually, I want to have the N have that little kind of like underline. So I'm going to option drag it from the H instead and just get my ascender with my direct select A and just shorten that back up to the X height there. All right, so now that we have our pieces, let's go ahead and get rid of this one. And maybe what we'll do is we'll unlock our guides section, drag all that off, and then get our lettering and pull it back up here. And I'll just try to be wary of the guides. It'll be nice if we have those to double check our work too. So now that we have this, those are some good bones. They're not perfect, but they're good. So let's go ahead and reverse that. It's like a home renovation show. You got to start somewhere. And let's Pathfinder out this counter. That's the negative space in the center of a 0 or any shape, or a 0 and O in this instance. You know, the counter could be the negative space in this H. It's just any negative space that's semi-enclosed or fully enclosed in a letter. And now we can kind of start adjusting. So the first thing I want to do is draw a little rectangle where my O is going to be cut so that I can see my E through. Okay, that's already looking better. And this E needs the most help. So with the time, in case we run out of time, I'm going to mostly focus on this. So right now my thicks are about this wide. Sometimes what I'll do is draw a little circle and just kind of, that's the width of my widest point of my lettering. And I'll use that as a guide. I'll kind of drag it around my board for where I need it to kind of finesse my lettering. So I'm going to take this anchor point, move it a little bit over here. I want more weight on the bottom of my E. If I think about the downstroke of a pen, then I can think about where I'm putting the weight. Whenever you have a downstroke, that always is heavier than the upstroke if you're doing a contrasting font or a contrasting lettering. So I see, okay, that needs to be about that thickness instead. That's looking better. That's looking way better. And then actually that anchor point needs to be a little bit, it's kind of feeling a little bit abrupt there. And I might even adjust that as well. And then if I option drag this to make a copy, maybe I want that to be at least closer in thickness. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but that would be helpful. And I think I'm just gonna go Shift C so I can redraw these handles. They're all out of whack. Let's just start again. And that's looking good. Okay. This needs help for sure. Maybe this whole top is kind of thick, or maybe not. We'll see. We'll see where we like how it's going. But that's all it is. It's just drawing things, finessing till, you know, you're so tired of it, and then sleeping on it. That's the real key. That's the sprinkles on top, is sleeping on it and then coming back next day and saying, okay, this looks great. This looks weird. I definitely need to fix that. That E's looking way better. If I go Shift semicolon, it'll take away my guide so I can kind of see where we're at. Okay, that's looking pretty cool, actually. I think I'm going to select my little underline here, my swash underline, extend that out. This O needs serious amount of help, but we only have 3 minutes, so we're gonna just kind of see what we can do in that time. And then, like I said, we'll sleep on it, and maybe I'll post this to our Instagram a little later, and then you can see where we ended up. But definitely try this out. We'd love to see how it works for you. And this is one of those things where it's practice makes perfect. Just keep trying different kinds of lettering. Some of my favorite sites to get inspiration are the Letterform Archive, which is an amazing place with tons of references. They have all sorts of really cool old vintage, like 1500s and even earlier of type specimens. And then also Fonts in Use is another really great site. Both of them are run in part by, I think, Stephen Coles, among many other people, Florian Hardwig, a lot of people that just make this thing run and do it for free. It's so cool. So definitely check those two out for inspiration. Get multiple references, find some cool things, and then try to blend them together. See what you can make when you put it together. That's kind of a fun way to start making something that's uniquely your own. Put your own spin on it. So that's looking fairly good. I would say this S definitely needs some help. I think if we were to maybe change that directional a bit, maybe extend this out and change this a little bit, that would feel a little bit smoother. It's kind of looking better, but it's supposed to be kind of weird. Like this S, it's supposed to look kind of like, why is it doing that? Again, we know the rules so we can break them, right? And maybe it's that this anchor point needs to go down a little further. Let's just redraw that. Yeah, that's looking better. And then I'll just thin that up a bit. The S feels a little bit too heavy compared to everything. And maybe extend this out a bit too. And a lot of people say like you want to have 90-degree angles on all of your anchor points, but I'm doing in italics. So a lot of my anchor points won't be 90-degree angles. And you know what? If you can't get 90-degree angles, that's fine. As long as it looks nice, that's all that matters. So if I'm having trouble here, sometimes I'll just say that needs to go a little bit like that. You don't always have to follow that rule. It's just kind of a helpful guide for how to get really nice rounds that aren't wonky. So I would definitely want to fix this up a little bit too. But I think overall we got to a good place, and in only 25 minutes, you all. So I definitely need to continue to finesse this. I think I will go back to the straight. But there we are. That's where we got. So thank you all so much for joining us. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Wade's been great for helping us. Stay tuned all week. We'll be doing more tomorrow. We're going to be customizing fonts. So taking fonts that exist and making them your own. And like we said, definitely tag us at Adobe. We're #Adobe Live and share what you made. Share how you use these tips and tricks and made them your own. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you again, same place, same time tomorrow.